you.
Dr. Sumaiya, Shaykh, thank you for joining us. Already a very emotional conversation. Quickly, let me just ask you what I asked Tehseen in the beginning. What we've seen unfolding in the last few days, the mob on the street, what is your first reaction when you see the kind of provocation that is now just completely out in the open?
Thanks, Jyotsna, for inviting me, and hi, Tehseen. We've
Hi.
hi. We've been very unfortunate to see this in our lifetime. We thought that the insanity of wars and hatred and violence we'd left behind. But as a neuroscientist, as a neurobiologist, what I feel that this is important. It's a very important part of our evolutionary cycle. Like, this is what makes us humans. This is what creates like boundaries and divisions between people, because when people are insecure, when people have low resources in their lives, when people are fearful of annihilation of their identities or of their lives, of their children's life, of their culture, whatever, the fear that can be created, it can be false, it can be real. I'm not saying it's false or real. It's just that it can be created through words or messaging or through propaganda. And then when we have that situation, it is very human for people to go out and create these feelings of, when you call hatred, what I call, it's a very cognitive disgust, fear, and all of that bundled together. So hatred is not just dislike for somebody. It's also mixed with a lot of fear and disgust. And that, when I first look at it, I see this is a normal human behavior, given the fact how much of hatred and violence we are seeing online, on television, on media. This is a product of that consumption. And this, we wouldn't be humans if we wouldn't see these things. I'm not saying they're right to do what they're doing, but they are doing as a result of what they've been fed to. Right, and the consumption is very much of the same, and it's just a reflection of that. Second thing is that what I fear is even more, I think, damaging, is that these are young people. When I saw that Muni, when he was in the car talking about raping women and doing stuff to Muslims, I did not see Muni. I saw the people endorsing him. See, people like him need an audience. He would be nowhere if there wasn't an audience. And people like him need that audience around. And what did we see around him? 20s, mid-20s or 20-year-old guys, men, boys, rather young boys, young men, are surrounded by him, taking footage, videos of him, and circulating and uploading that, and deriving pleasure that somebody from their in-group or their circle is saying what everybody wants to say, but nobody can say it in the open because of fear of, social abandonment and all sorts of things. So what I see is those 20-year-olds have at least 50 to 60, or maybe around 40 to 60 years of public life in front of them, if they are going to be in public life, and they're going to perpetuate the same sentiments for the next 40, 50 years. And this Muni guy, or you and I, might die in the next, couple of decades, 30, 40, 50. We don't have, nobody goes beyond 100 these days, and nobody is politically active or publicly active beyond 100. But these young boys are going to outlive all of us, the three of us at least, and a lot of the people that we know are saying, this is what we want, is this what we've created? That is the most frightening thing out of all of this. And they're going to keep doing this in their own little ways, no matter how the government changes, no matter how much the people change. There will be this impressionable boys that have been brainwashed by people like Muni will continue to do what they're doing. And that is the sad reality of it.
Can I add to something that Sumaiya said?
Of course. Yeah.
Sumaiya,
You know, so when,
Tehseen,
sorry,
Sumaiya.
Samaya, I am so sorry, and good
No
morning, and I'm
problem.
so sorry, Samaya. I'm sorry I got
No
that wrong.
problem.
Something that I wanted to add to what she said, and this is a question. When I was fighting the mob violence case, and I was bringing this up in the Supreme Court, this is the one question that she's raised that completely bothered me. Think about this. Young people in their 20s, 30s, using the most modern technology, the most latest telephone gadgets, whether it's a Samsung, an Apple, or the latest Android, using the most fast technology, whether it's Wi-Fi, a broadband, 4G, 5G, us are enjoying something that was something that happened in the 14th, 15th, 16th century. That is mob violence. So the dichotomy of it, that something that was so old, that in Hindi we say jo itna prachin tha, you are today, we're using modern technology without being ashamed and spreading that. So the dichotomy of using modern technology of doing something that was old. But there's one more thing that my research found out. Look, wherever there were mobs, whether it was 14th century Europe, whether it was in America, where the verb lynching came out when they were targeting black citizens in America, or other places where mob violence happens. Mobs come when you don't have jobs. There is a direct relationship between the economy contracting and mobs growing. The more the economy contracts, the more mobs grow. When you look at those images of young people, youngsters with swords dancing outside another religious structure, or playing abusive songs, running down a religion or a caste or a group, ask yourself: is anyone in that group with those swords a privileged youngster? And the answer is no. Is any one of that youngster a politician's son? The answer is no. These are mobs who don't have jobs. The politician's son are in Dubai, are in Singapore, are abroad, are holidaying, are learning English, are enjoying their steaks, are enjoying their chicken. But here in India, they're spreading hate. And that is the dichotomy. And young Indians are spreading hate with modern technology.
No, I'm interested. It's interesting you bring that up, Tehseen, because it's something I have written in my column today as well. That, where are the children of those people who can actually stop this free fall? None of them are out on the streets. These are not the people that you will see on the streets. So, Sumaya, this age group doing what they're doing right now, as I was asking Tehseen right at the beginning, is this now, are we seeing a point of no return? Because, this is, as you said, a generation that has the capability to go on for decades with this mindset.
No, of course not. I'm very optimistic that there are so many means to get people out of them. See, so the research that I do is in violent behavior, and it correlates with how your brain responds to hate and violence, and how people who engage in violence and hate become. And there is an overlapping situation. I said that in my NDTV show with Ravish yesterday or last night, that these guys have an addiction to violence. And when I say that, because if you see the history of how these militancies or movements have gone, around the time when a lot of these movements happen in the Balkans and Chechnya and Kashmir and Afghanistan, and you would see a lot of people doing something called the cult hopping. And I often talk about it, that one person goes into a cult that wants you to be violent, and if they get either disenfranchised with them, or the cult dissolves, they do not want to remain there in the same situation and say, okay, my goal is achieved, let's just finish and go on with our lives. They want to do the next cult. They want to go into the next cult that gives them the same environment, that sustains their passion. And what they're addicted to in this scenario, in this typical scenario, is violence. That they feel good about the violence, and the research that I've been doing shows that there's a huge overlap between the violence that they do on the streets, and this is the extremist violence. This is not any type of violence. I'm not talking about the defensive violence or those types. This is very much related to ideological, political, religious type of violence. It doesn't have to be political, religious. There are even groups that do these things. You must have heard about incels. They do a lot of violence. There's in the US and Canada. They don't have a political ideology. And so there is a group that makes the other people an out group, and makes you an in-group. And there's no personal experience with any other person in that group, may or may not be, but you're just killing a stranger for no reason because they belong in that group, right? So this type of violence gives you a lot of pleasure, and the same brain regions that get activated in consuming addictive substances. When you're addicted to cocaine or methamphetamine or alcohol for that matter, you have the activation of the same type of brain regions that produce the pleasure of addiction, right? And violence also gives that same type of pleasure. And one other thing that it does is activates fear as well in the same group of organs. It's insula and amygdala mostly, but in the same group of organs, there's also fear, which kind of correlates and talks to each other. And then, this is important, some of the prefrontal regions of your brain, which are like more for social and emotional cognition and empathy, more importantly, they are deactivated. And these regions also code for your, executive functioning and the things that makes us humans. We're not primates and chimpanzees and animals. The things that makes us humans is that area of the brain, is the prefrontal cortex. That is deactivated. And if you notice that people who consume alcohol, it's the same deactivation. They don't have a good, executive functioning. So what it does is it reduces empathy, reduces executive functioning. And I'm not saying everybody who consumes alcohol is violent, but there are certain people who become more aggressive when they're consuming alcohol. There are a certain group of people. Now, people who are mellow will become even more mellow when they consume alcohol. But for some people who are already aggressive, they'll become hyper aggressive after alcohol. So this social empathy, cognition, and executive functioning drops down. Your pleasure of violence increases and you indulge in it. But because it's addiction, and only because it's addiction, it is a learned behavior and something that you're not born with. And because it's learned, you can actually make them unlearn it. How? There are ways to do it, but it is so complex. And you can put them into a rehab program if they want to, and get them to come out of it, just like the way people get out of addiction. There are new technologies for those things. Some of us that we have workshops, but these guys have to understand that these guys are radicalized, engaging in violence, and want to come out of it. If there is no drive from inside or push from the society or from the government or from the people around them, if they have the same audience to applaud them, they don't want to go back. They want to remain how they are. And that is going to be the tragedy. Nobody accepts them as violent extremists. For me, they are. I mean, how can it be possible that these guys are not violent extremists, but, the Kashmiris are, but the Naxalis are, the Taliban is. This science is across every religion. It is for humans, right? And humans are the same, more or less. There's smaller differences, but it's not about race or caste or religion, or even gender. I mean, we've seen women participating in these things. So the idea is that it can be unlearned, but it's not going to be without the realization in the broader society and the push from the government that these guys are extremists and they need to unlearn what they've learned, which I don't see happening in the near future. So that's a sad reality.
Tehseen, do you want to add to that? I mean, this is, as Sumaiya is also saying, this is a bunch of people who actually, more than a bunch of people, who rejoice when somebody else is abused, when somebody else is attacked. How do you get them back into the fold?
So she said a very important thing. The government has to push it. Here, the government is encouraging it. The government is cheering it. I'm talking about people who are convicted for mob violence. The government minister, the union government ministers, actually welcomed a convict with flowers. They wrapped the tricolor, for which I would die, on somebody who was accused of mob violence. This is a government that is encouraging mob violence. Let's go back to what I said before she joined. The Supreme Court asked the government of India to pass a mob violence bill. The Home Minister of India stands up in Parliament against the Supreme Court and says we don't need a law for mob violence. And states that are opposition states that have passed it, the President of India refuses to sign it. This clearly shows that the current government is enjoying the mob violence. Now, why do they enjoy it? I want to go back to what I started with. It's a textbook procedure for the BJP. What the BJP does is it first creates division, insecurities, hatred, and then it comes on to prey on that hatred. I go back to every single violence that has happened in this country. Why is it the BJP supporters always involved on the other side? Why is it? Nobody's answering that question. How is it that everybody is wrong except for the BJP supporters? Why are there violence everywhere BJP supporters are there, and why is it present before an election? Because she rightly said, there is demonizing. Then the BJP comes in as if they're a savior. You're losing your culture, you're losing your identity. And here's BJP that's coming to save your culture, your identity, you're lost. Don't be scared. We are here to save you from the villains. What people are not understanding is that for 70 years, this great nation prospered. It went ahead of many other countries that got independence 70 years ago. It is 10 years ago, our aspirations were to compete with European countries, with Scandinavian nations, with America. We wanted to be a free democracy. We wanted to be globally as competitive with America. Today, our barometer of comparison, if you don't like something, is Pakistan and Sri Lanka, two failed countries. That is how reverse India has gone to. And I'm afraid to say India is in a reverse gear. Every single Indian who's privileged, who's over $5 million US, every single Indian has his foot abroad. Every single Indian. None of them are on the streets. They encourage the Prime Minister. They go on cheering the Prime Minister, but all of them have made arrangements abroad. And that is where India is in a reverse gear.
So, Sumaiya, how in a society as diverse as ours, where the divisions are now so deep, how can we integrate?
Well, frankly, I'm not a sociologist, but it's a very important question to answer. I think if you're going to be going down to our very, very, basic identities, like what color are we born with, what family are we born with, what's our last name, and there are further divisions in it. If we are going to get people to unite in the name of, for politics or whatever, the way politicians in India are working right now, and it is a sad case for a lot of other countries too, not just India, but particularly in India and the rest of the South Asia as well, the way Pakistan is also working, is that they're choosing those identities that you have no control over. I don't control, over what, I did not control what family I was born into, and so is the case for a lot of people, for everybody. And then you pick that identity, and you pick that something that you're born with, something that you've never had anything to do with. You've made no contribution to it, just by being born a Hindu or a Muslim or a specific caste or community. You've not added anything to it. It is about the past. It is about the glory. It is about, whatever the general value that has been falsely created in the society by the community. And then you use politics to create vote banks, that this is a Hindu vote bank area, this is a Muslim, this is a Shia, this is a lower caste, this is an upper caste. And I'm just making this simplistic, but if you create those divisions and you try to manipulate the voters thinking that this is their core identity, well, no. Like my primary identity, I mean, you see so many people on their Twitter and social media profiles, they put Muslim first or Hindu first, or, why is this your first identity? Are you not somebody's, parent or child, or the profession that you're doing it? Are you not from there? Or are you not, that identity? I mean, do you think that the next person who has the same identity as you, are you the same people? No, you're not. You have different aspirations. You have different needs and wants and desires in your life. That's not what kind of defines you. But still, that is their primary identity. And people have gone to that root identity and saying, oh, this is our identity, and this is who I'm going to socialize with, this is who I'm going to marry into, this is who my friends are going to be, and this is who is going to come to my home when I have a party. So when you have that division, that there'll only be a certain type of caste or religion type of people, we've lost it. We've been successfully giving them what they always wanted. Create a unison or a single identity, and then they can manipulate us in a bigger way. I mean, the way religions have worked is just that. I mean, Islam all across the world is made of so many cultures and identities, but the caliphate, the ISIS, what they wanted to do was, forget about what you've been doing. Let's Arabicize everybody because your culture is not important. Your culture is not important. Let's come in the same umbrella and fight for the caliphate because Muslims are going through a bad situation all over the world. And what does that get you? Fear, and then as a result of it, you have these violent tendencies. There is no simpler way of saying that the politics or the politicians everywhere should abandon the way that identities are being played in politics. You shouldn't be voting for Dalit because you're a Dalit. And this happens in Pakistan too. Even though everybody is Muslim, and it's a very good example because even if you vote in everybody Hindu or everybody Muslim, you'll still have more identities there because the identity is not going to end. So in Pakistan, what happens is everybody's Muslim, right? Sure, a Shia might vote for a Shia, but majority are the Sunni Muslims. What happens is, oh, you're a Kashmiri here, I'm going to vote for a Kashmiri because I am a Kashmiri. And the opposition party will also have the same candidate who's a Kashmiri. And it's the same thing with Punjabi and the Sindhi. Guess what? India has 1,000 more of these. Is it going to ever end? No, it will not. And if that identity is finished, there will be the next one and the next one. So this is just a bad idea to start with. This was never a good idea. I mean, specifically where, you know, it's a secular country, it's every type of person in India, with every religion especially. That was just a bad thing to start with. So unless and until the government goes back to not talking about religion or caste or identity in particular, I think we're not going to be able to go back. There's no real way to go back to what we had before.
Yeah, I just want to disagree slightly. There is a slight difference in a religious identity and a caste identity, and I know that on a basic level that sounds that no, they're both identities, and I completely agree with it. But in India, there have been castes that have for centuries been subjugated to unfair treatment. For 5,000 years they haven't. So so you actually do need to talk about caste for affirmative action. You cannot ignore it. Even today, as we celebrate the birthday in India of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, the man who gives the constitution, who was a Dalit thinker and a Dalit leader and the biggest Dalit leader India has ever produced, you got to ask yourself, how many Dalit judges are there in the Supreme Court of India? How many Dalit chief justices in the High Court of India? How many Dalit priests? How many Dalit, let's look at Uttar Pradesh, district magistrates? How many Dalit police commissioners? How many Dalit SPs? And the answer to that is much, much, much lesser than the proportion of the representation in population. So the population does not give them the same amount of seats. Are you trying to tell me that Dalits are less meritorious than people who have less percentage but occupy these high positions? How many vice chancellors are Dalits? Do you know that the government of India is actually using this, that we don't want to talk about caste, but while trying to not talk about caste, because while talking about caste, you have to understand the government of India is also not religious. It uses religion as a tool, but it is a casteist government. It is a government that only follows one caste. Ask the RSS, why has there never been a Dalit RSS chief? Why has there never been an OBC RSS chief? So the RSS is also anti-Dalit, but they use caste, they use religion to overcome the divisions of caste, thereby creating a majority vote bank for themselves to come to power. So the BJP's poison is to overcome the caste, but that's not affirmative action. That is negative action, because when you overcome the caste, you should overcome the caste by making a Dalit chief justice, by making a Dalit police commissioner, by making a Dalit DM. They don't do that. Those positions goes to people from their caste. Why is there no Dalit RSS chief? Can anyone answer that question? There's never been a Dalit RSS chief from the time RSS was formed. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I did not say that wasn't required.
So it's a slight, religion, yes, but here in India, that's a,
No, I mean, I did not mean to put it, I was only talking about identities. That doesn't mean that there should not be representation. That's the most important thing.
And affirmative
action, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
So there's, Tehseen, before I wrap up, a final question for the two of you. You were reminiscing the other day about how things were just a year ago when we were lashed by the second wave, and how civil society had come together. Everybody was, together, brothers, sisters, irrespective of caste, religion. Everybody worked together to help whoever they could help. I mean, you don't, at some level, blame celebrities for not speaking up anymore, whether it's Bollywood or cricketers, because the kind of reactions that they get once they do speak up, I guess, just puts them back into saying they'd rather not push the envelope. But the silence of the middle class, how important is that role been in for us to reach where we have?
I was talking to you the other day. Just a year ago, we were faced with this, exactly a year ago, with this challenge, which was the greatest human tragedy this country faced since 1947. And at least from my personal experience, I can say that most of my volunteers were Muslims and Hindus, and a lot of them were fasting. It was Ramzan and Navratri at that time, and they would sometimes not would go without food for 48 hours to give people oxygen. I cannot believe a year later we are today hating each other as communities when we didn't have oxygen and beds a year ago. To your question about middle class and celebrities, I just did a reality show and I came out of it. And on that reality show, something very interesting happened. So when I was about to go, they said, look, but we don't want politics on the show. We don't want you to discuss politics. And something came out just because there were a couple of other people from the right wing who were on the show, and we got along very well. And we were discussing the land acquisition bill. And suddenly, in this reality show comes a noise from above, so it's called the jailer, who says, stop discussing politics. That's how scared everybody is to talk about politics. That you cannot talk about politics. You don't want to push the envelope about politics. And I don't blame them because they have a lot to lose. As for the middle class, I don't think that the middle class is completely fed on hate. I still think that the middle class is not so hateful. But yes, there is a sense of them losing their identity. There is fake history, and there is fear mongering that's happening. Unfortunately, this fear mongering has been institutionalized by the government, by the top people in government who keep spreading lies and hate. And that institutionalization has led to people saying that, okay, even if the economy is collapsing, the prime minister is doing something good. But they cannot define what that something good is. That something good at some point is hate and bigotry. It's not they cannot define it. But they say, kuch to theek kar raha hoga, prime minister. This is a man who's been responsible directly for lives being lost. Forget on hatred, because of silly decisions like demonetization, because of the second wave. But yet he gets away by people saying he must be doing something right, because the machinery around him stokes fear and plays on identity. And that is his strongest point. And he's institutionalized that.
Identity
he's
has been quite an
institutionalized.
overlapping issue through this conversation, hasn't it, Sumaiya? Before I let you go as well, a personal question to you. I mean, from fear mongering to being a Muslim, the fear, the fact that you quite don't know, you have relatives, you have friends in India who quite don't know what comes the next day, from the fact that even festivals have been compromised. What goes on in their minds?
Jyotsna, I'm often, as Tehseen said, it's like a double whammy for me. I often not talk about politics in so many areas, because sometimes I'm scared that I'll put something out there and it would be so personal to me, and for the other person it's just a dinner table conversation, and they're going to completely, which has happened so many times before by the people who know me personally, who've known me for all my life, and it's happened again and again, and they'll completely dish my experience as if it never even happened, and belittle it, and then move forward, and because that is their belief system. And that's the reason I don't talk about politics. And I feel that a lot of these people, the middle class especially, they've been desensitized to a lot of this. As soon as I say this has happened to me because I'm a Muslim, it will become about the identity, and then they don't see me, who they've known for years and years. They see Muslim, the bracket that goes through something, and they're going to dish that and say, no, you got to forgive, you got to move on, you got to do this, you got to do that, or it didn't even happen, or why did the other people do this from your community, and if they wouldn't have done this, it wouldn't have happened to you. A lot of people don't know I come from Gujarat. I left after 2002. I was in school, and I haven't lived in India for the last 2 decades. All my family moved out. Now I live in Sweden since the last 7 years, but before I was in Australia. I'm an Australian. My family lives there, and what we've seen is just incomparable to a lot of people, especially the middle class. They haven't seen what we've seen. What my tragedy was, and I completely buried it, and I just continued doing my science, and I wanted to be a scientist and did all the stuff that I did now. But I completely buried it, thinking that I don't want my brain to acknowledge it, that this happened to me, because that was going to push me into trauma. And little did I know that it will keep coming back to me and haunting again and again. And that's probably the reason why I'm looking into this type of people. Why do people become extremists, and why do people become like violent in the name of religion? But for most middle class, I feel that they are not interested if it's not happening to them, or they're in group, unless their identity is not so strong. But they're also very apathetic. Like their apathy just surprises me so much. I think it's something to do with the way that the tone of our culture is. It's very lifted up to high. Everything that needs to shake you needs to be here. And I think you can see that in the COVID response as well. Like for most people, 100 people dying every day or 500 people dying every day would be a lot. But that doesn't shake people up. That doesn't like get them to worry about something, unless it's like over 100,000 new cases a day, and the riverbed filled with dead bodies. Because the tone is here. Like, can we be sensitive enough and be an empath, or slightly an empath, to kind of recognize that when the other person is saying, and it goes both ways, when when a Kashmiri Pandit is saying this is what happened to them, yes, don't hate on it and don't try to retaliate and take revenge on it, but we shouldn't be dismissing what they went through. They went through a real bad situation, and I know people, have friends who lost homes and stuff, and that is also a bad thing. But at the same time, when it comes to people in Delhi riots or Gujarat, or in the general, people getting lynched and stuff, there's no empathy for them. There's so much apathy, and I don't understand, how did we come here? I mean, I do understand, but it just boggles me so much that this is what humans are capable of, this kind of complete lack of empathy. And we're not sociopaths, we're not psychopaths, we don't have personality disorders. This is just normal people. This is everyday humans. And that really boggles me. I don't know what to say.
I just want to add one thing. Just want to add one thing. At the peak of this mob violence, when we put a lot of pressure and we threatened that we will sit outside the Prime Minister's house, it moved Supreme Court. The Prime Minister was forced to make a statement, right, on mob violence. And you know what the Prime Minister says? He says, and I'll say it in Hindi and then I'll translate in English. He says, "Inko mat maro, mujhe maro. Don't hit them, hit me." Now, in a democracy, in constitutional law, as Prime Minister, you should be saying anyone who indulges in violence will go in jail. Why are you telling people don't hit them, hit me? No one's going to hit you. We don't want anyone to hit you. But you see, that's what I'm trying to say. That is all the tears, the drama. But beyond that, there is no institutionalized mechanism to stop violence. On the contrary, there is an institutionalized mechanism to create violence, to create hatred by starting rumors, by starting fights. Now I'm going to quote the Home Minister of India. He says in Rajasthan that Akhilesh Yadav, a rumor was spread that Akhilesh Yadav slapped his father. Now this is not about mob violence, but this is true story. The Home Minister of India is saying this, Amit Shah ji. And he says it's not true, but one of our persons spread this rumor, and this created a lot of hatred for Akhilesh Yadav, and we won the elections. So we can spread whatever rumors we want. This is the machinery, institutionalized machinery you're dealing with. The Home Minister of India is saying, we can create any rumor you want and spread hate. That's the fact. And the Prime Minister says, oh, don't hit anybody. He's not saying I will send you to jail. He's not saying I will come back on the full force of the law. He's saying, oh, please don't hit people. That institutionalization of hate with a machinery that backs you, where the government of India and the members of parliament and ministers felicitate you if you're involved in mob violence, felicitate you. That is institutionalized hate. That's what's happened in India. This never happened before. It's happened now. They've institutionalized it. There was hatred before, yes. There was mob violence before, yes. But governments didn't institutionalize it. The institutionalization has happened now. And that is the scary part.
And with the complete disregard of the justice system, of the law, the courts, is what we've also seen in the last few weeks. But Tehseen, as always, good to have you on the show and to listen to whatever you can, or you're always there to add lots and lots of information to an issue. Dr. Sumaiya, Shaykh, hope to get you again, but thanks so much for sharing your perspective. the fact that you've been speaking about this lack of, empathy in our society is something that's also been bothering me a lot as to, we were not like this. We were very empathetic people. We were people who went together. But now I know both of you are saying there's always hope. There is always hope, but I think, I hope we don't have to hit further rock bottom before we get up. Things don't look very good, but I think lots more people need to speak up like the two of you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and stay safe, and hope to see you guys again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.